Hello, everybody. Welcome to a new episode of UNtracing Trauma with JeGaysus, our live podcast. And yes, we are live today. Sorry, it's been a couple of weeks. For anyone who's new here, basically, this is just a show for walks of life and what their religious experiences are, or maybe religious experiences weren't. And pretty much, I always say, or I guess I said this description always says that if you don't have a story exactly like these people, that's fine. But what I try to do here is by lifting up different voices, maybe you can see bits and pieces of yourself in their stories, and you can take maybe tools that they've used or lessons they've learned around religious trauma and indoctrination and apply it to your life. So yeah, with all that said, if you would like to join us on Discord to talk more, I do have a Discord and Patreon. Let me go ahead and shout out my patrons, my disciples, really quickly. That is Bart, Adele, Amy, Anna S, Arget, Candy B, Carol J, Claire W, Claire G, Cousin Jake, Gina, Goth Barbie, Heather C, Jubilee, Just Cuz, Kat L, Katie Z, Mary M, Modern Day Masquerade, and Fraudy Chick just joined this morning. Hello. Thank you all so much. And if Patreon's not your thing, I also just launched YouTube memberships. So I think you should see it on the profile. If I set it up correctly, you can like click membership on the live and join or something. I haven't played with it, so let me know. But there's 3 different levels there, and I'm going to add those perks to Patreon to kind of match the levels too. But basically, exclusive live streams. We're going to start playing games on YouTube Live, membership chats. I'll follow you back at certain levels. Go check out the perks. Let me know if you want to add anything. Okay, so now all that said, please like the stream as soon as you're in here because that'll help boost it in the algorithm. And if you're listening on a podcast, go ahead and rate, leave a review, do whatever you would like. And we will go on to episode number 7 of UNtracing Trauma. My guest today is Hilary. Hi, Hilary. How are you? If you do not follow her, she's amazing. I don't know. You need to, because like you are so unabashedly unashamed and direct, and it's so refreshing to see. Can you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself, introduce to the audience?
Yeah, so I am the internet's most famous anthropologist and prolific Twitter troll. So I'm a PhD candidate at the University of British Columbia. I'm sort of like my career trajectory is like Jordan Peterson, but not a shithead.
Okay. I was like, why do you want to be him? Okay, not a shithead. Got it.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm a PhD candidate. I'm an anthropologist. I'm in the anthropology program at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver, even though I live in Toronto. And yeah, I'm on Twitter and TikTok and YouTube talking about primarily drug policy and psychedelics and sort of consciousness alteration and cognitive liberation, ending the war on drugs, and anti-capitalism. Yeah, so doing a lot of sort of organizing. And my main thing is making sure that people understand the power that they have, the power that we have. We all hate like all the stuff, you know, the stuff that's going on in the world. It's bad. This is mostly bad, but we don't have to just sit there and take it. We can actually do things, and organizing with our fellow working class people is really rewarding and fun. And yeah, so that's me.
That's awesome. So we were just talking like right before we came in here. So you're from Canada. I think that's probably important for the people to know, because we are like brother sister countries, but at the same time we're kind of different in the way that we've evolved. We kind of started in the same terrible place. Like you said, colonialism affects every country it touches. But
yeah, if the US is like the really destructive, violent brother, Canada is like this shitty, sneaky sister that looks like I'm doing nothing wrong, but is actually like just destroying, you know.
Fair. Everything. I like that. I feel like in America, we sometimes have a romanticized version of what Canada is. And we're like, everyone's so nice and polite and the government just wants to help. just because we've been so abused in our relationship with the United States that everything looks golden.
It's better. Don't get me wrong. It's better, but there's still a lot of skeletons in the closet and violence and
it's been taking notes from our government. I've been watching as they're like, oh, we should do that here. So let us go into, I guess, your story, like how you formed. You turned into this like advocate radical person. Where did Hilary begin? So let's say, were you religious growing up? Were you born into a religious family? What did your early life look like in regards to that?
So I was raised just sort of generic white Canadian, but my background is Irish and Italian, which means Catholic, big time. So both sides of the family were Catholic, and I was raised in a sort of Catholic environment. It wasn't really intense. I didn't find out until much later that my dad, so my dad never came to church with us. My mom would bring us to church, and we would ask my dad, why don't you come to church with us? And he would say, oh, I'm going to start going to church as soon as they let women be priests. Ooh. And my naive ass when I was a kid was like, no, but I thought that he meant, oh, so that'll be like a couple months from now. I thought he was, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. That's probably in the works. So, right. And I didn't realize that was his way of saying like never.
That's funny.
But my parents both went to Catholic school.
I was gonna say, was your dad raised Catholic, or was this like something he was doing for your mom?
My dad was raised Catholic.
Interesting.
He did not have those beliefs anymore by the time I was a kid, but just kind of was like, whatever.
Yeah.
Here's the interesting thing, though. Because I went to a French school, which is a thing, like a French immersion school, which is a thing in Canada. You can go to like, special French classes and you can have all your classes in French. Because of that, I wasn't able to go to a Catholic school that I would have otherwise. And me and 4 other kids from my French school, because we weren't able to go to the Catholic school and get like the Catholic indoctrination, the lessons and everything that you need in order to get confirmed as a Catholic.
The whole catechism stuff.
Yeah, we didn't have that. And so instead, our parents put us in private Catholic lessons once a week. So I had one of my like extracurriculars was Catholic lessons. It was like the Catholic school, curriculum, but like once a week with our parents. And I don't know if you have any other questions, we can talk about that.
Oh, I mean, we'll be jumping in and out of it. I'm just listening for right now. But okay. Following, I think. I'm so naive when it comes to Catholic stuff. It's kind of funny because, I mean, obviously I have this entire channel, but I'm always like, I don't understand the steps of confirmation or what age that happens at. And I'm always like,
yeah. I mean, it's so Catholics have a lot of like rites of passage. And so there's, if I can I'm vaguely remembering all of my upbringing. If anyone's in the chat of this live, they can correct me. We're in the comments on this. There's something like 5 stages that you have to go through in order to like get into heaven or to just be a good Catholic. And one is being baptized. So you have to get baptized when you're a baby. One is first communion, the first time you like eat Jesus's flesh and drink his blood, which is so normal when you're a Catholic. And then on hindsight, you're like, okay.
It's normal in evangelical Christianity too. So
cannibalism, just straight up cannibalism. Cool. And then the third step is confirmation. So that's when you've gone through all the lessons and you've learned all the Catholic, whatever, the values and lessons that you're supposed to be imparted, and you get confirmed so it's kind of like a bar or bat mitzvah.
So you did do like the baptism part and you did first communion, but you stopped at the confirmation.
No, I was confirmed.
Oh.
So so it's you get that done when you're it's about 13, 14. It's like a bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah, except you don't get a cool party, and it's like you do it kind of like all your whole class at once.
Got it.
And then the next rite of passage is marriage. Opposite sex
so marriage. Often is.
Yeah, you got it. You have to do that. That's a rite of passage, or you just don't get to, be a person.
And it has to be in the church. I know that. It has to be in the Catholic Church. Okay.
Yeah. And then I think the next one after that is just you have to get before you die, a priest is supposed to come and give you like
your last rites.
Whatever.
Okay.
Yeah.
Following.
So I got through step 1 and 2, and between those 2 steps, I had to go get private lessons. But so here's the interesting thing, and this is why I think this story is interesting. The people who were going to the kids who were going to the Catholic school nearby that I would have gone to but didn't because I was learning French instead, they were getting ostensibly the same education that I was in my private lessons. Obviously, it would have been like a little more comprehensive in the day-to-day in those schools, because there's a lot of Catholic schools in Ontario, because fucked up thing, they're all like publicly funded also.
Really?
Tons of people go to Catholic schools in Ontario.
Is it public? Like, are they public Catholic schools, or are they still privatized in terms of you have to pay for tuition?
No, they're free, but
really?
I'm pretty sure. I'm not totally sure, but yeah, it's like a separate system that is at least partially funded by the government. Maybe there's some tuition,
like a subsidy kind of thing.
Yeah. Oh, and people hate it, but the system has been entrenched for so long. There's so many of these schools that it's like people just go to the school, they wear the stupid uniform, they just like, whatever. They're just, it's not really considered to be like you don't have to be Catholic to go to those schools.
My dad was raised Jewish, and he literally went to Catholic school for like 5 years because it was the like posh thing to do in LA.
Right. Oh, okay. Interesting.
The only like private schools at the time probably were like Catholic. So they've got their fingers in a lot of pots. And especially in Canada, the Catholic school system, like the Catholics were the ones who set up a majority of the school systems back in the 1800s, and that's why they ran the residential schools. I was just gonna say residential schools are here in America as well, but like definitely in Canada has a terrifying history.
Yeah, if anyone hasn't heard of the residential school system in Canada, this is one of those things where like you learn about it and you're like, oh yeah, Canada has this like really nice supposed, front that we put up to the world where we're just peaceful and nice, and it's actually
terrifying underneath.
Like horror, like the most horrifying. You can't even content warning for what I'm about to say if you're sensitive to issues involving dead children. Which I am. Usually I turn away when that stuff. It's just the next minute or so. The Catholic schools in Canada were set up as residential schools for the Indigenous people who lived here, still live here, but there were way more of them. But as a part of the colonization project, they forced every Indigenous child to go to these schools, like stole them from their parents at, gunpoint. In a lot of cases, or like coerce the parents, like they basically had to. They
bought some of them.
Stole all these kids, put them into schools, and the entire intention of the school was kill the Indian to save the man. And so it was basically, they knew, I'm an anthropologist. We know how important culture and language is to the continuation of traditions and, community and culture and family. And so they intentionally separated these kids from their parents and their families and communities. They made them learn English. They got rid, they indoctrinated them into Catholicism. Thousands of them died. We're talking, they are still finding, and in the last few years, they've been doing more excavations outside these schools. These schools would have graveyards of hundreds of dead children stolen from Indigenous communities. Because the conditions were horrible and they were abused and they were neglected and
they were starved. Literally, the reason why we have the food pyramid is because they would reduce their food intake and different kind of nutritional levels per child to experiment what's the minimum amount of calories somebody needs to survive, or what's the minimum amount of vitamin C somebody needs before they get scurvy. And so they were testing and withholding food from these kids that they kidnapped and were forcing to not speak their language and trying to convert religiously. And then what happens when you starve children? Some of them die, obviously, let alone the abuse cases that straight up were just a physical abuse. It's gross. It's bad.
I didn't know that about the food pyramid thing, but I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
As always, so many medical advancements on the backs of Black and Indigenous people. Anyways, I won't keep talking about that because we're trying not. This is
okay. Back to you. So there's a history on Canada. Everyone, trigger warning over for that part of it.
Yeah, we're back. But just if you are interested in like demystifying what Canada actually is, that's what we're based on. And there's still people in Canada who deny it. There's like tons of genocide deniers that are around. and like writing columns in mainstream newspapers. Anyways, so I didn't go to the Catholic school. And
Right.
so what I think is interesting about the way that I was raised, and I think that, you know, we can talk about the trauma and the bad stuff and everything, but like, how do we prevent this stuff from continuing to happen? Well, obviously these are structural issues that are very deeply entangled and entrenched, and it's going to be difficult. But I think that the dynamic that allowed me to escape my indoctrination, not that my parents tried that hard, but
still, church in general is trying to force ideas, even if your parents aren't.
I think it's instructive, because what happened was, everybody else, so picture you're in like a Catholic school classroom and you're getting your lesson from the nun or whatever. It's usually like nuns who are teaching those classes. And you're all having to sit forward. You have to like keep your mouth shut. Like, it's like a school, you know, you have to just, you can't be arguing with the teacher. You're kept in line. There's 30 of you in the class. For my private religion lessons, it was me, 3 friends, and one of our parents sitting at a table in one of our homes. So because I didn't grow up in a fundamentalist community where, like, you know, not that there was no like hitting of kids, but like it wouldn't have happened in this kind of situation.
Okay.
And we were, you know, like 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. It was a different power dynamic, right? So we're in a circle. We're not all facing this authority figure. The authority figure is on the same level as us. They're sitting at a table. It's like our parents, who we already kind of, you know, inherently don't respect as much as like a teacher in that kind of context, because we're like at home.
It's
and
a different kind of authority.
Yeah. What it did was it made it a more egalitarian setting, and it allowed us to ask questions. And that is the primary thing that religion, and you know this better than I do, the main thing, that the way that religious indoctrination works, and you can speak to this, is you are not allowed to ask questions.
That's it. That's how they keep you. And if you do, you get shamed away. Like, you're not supposed to question God. Is that doubting? Are you doubting? Are you filled with doubt? Are you lukewarm? Are you going to hell? Yeah, no, questions are huge.
Yeah. And so if you're not allowed to ask questions, or you have questions and you're told like just stop asking those or don't ask them, then that's the core of indoctrination, is not being allowed to ask questions. And we did ask questions because we kind of outnumbered them, and we would just, and they just, you know, they just weren't as like authoritarian about it. We did have one of the our teacher, professor, parents, we were like more afraid of him because he was very authoritative. He was super like nice also, but he was just like, he was a lawyer, so he was like, he just kind of knew how to command the space. But the other parents just didn't stand a chance. Like, there were just too many holes for us to poke.
And so did they rotated, like who was like talking that week or who was teaching? Was
every
like
4 months or something, it would be a different kid's parent.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, but were you still going to like mass or like the quote unquote proper church at that time?
Yeah, so I would go to church every Sunday. Once I started being old enough to kind of put up a fight, the reason I kept going was because this is like also a very Canadian thing. Every other week that you would go to church, they had free donuts in the basement from Tim Hortons, which is like a traditional.
I've heard about it.
Yeah. And I could never keep track of it when I was little, so I didn't know when I was going to get a donut or not. So it was like that like intermittent reward stuff. It was like,
they knew what they were doing. They got you there, and they kept you for a little bit.
Honestly, yeah.
It's interesting so that was. Let's kind of talk about that. So it makes it sound like this is when you were a teenager. You said you were still showing up for the donuts. That means that you're already mentally out. Like, you were checked out, but you were still showing up in person. So you had the whole physically in, mentally out thing going. What led to that disconnect?
Yeah, I mean, the truth is that I never felt the presence of the God that I was told about, like, in my heart. I would sit there at mass and try, like, I would like look up at this wooden ceiling. There's a beautiful church. I'd look up at it. And I was also lucky, by the way, in that the priest at my church was really nice. He was one of the few good ones. He was a really good guy, never laid a hand on anybody, thank God. And he was, and so what made him different is he did missions in Brazil, and he was one of those religious people, because they're out there, there's plenty of them, who genuinely believed in like the teachings of Jesus as like do kindness to others, you know, like
Right.
every time he would have a sermon, it would be about taking care of the poor, being kind, being a good person, which I hear is not what evangelicals are learning.
No. Evangelicals just focus on Paul for the most part, and it's like, you know, the world is against you on Paul. So like all the Romans and Corinthians and Hebrews being like, the world is against you. You are persecuted because you are chosen. You're the new Israelites. Like they're focused on everything else but Jesus.
Yeah.
They like Jesus because he saves them. They could care less what he did or does or says. As long as they're saved by Jesus, that's the part they like.
Right. Yeah. Yes. It's very Trumpian.
And I speak for all evangelicals, obviously. All 100%. Yep. All Christians before the comments come. Every Christian.
Okay, well, yeah, I mean, there was a lot of, so like in Catholicism, there's a lot of like ritual, there's a lot of like, it's all the masses.
That's the part I like. It's very theatrical. I love it.
Yeah,
it feels like very tied to the ancient centuries, you know. It feels like it's an actual practice. I like
it's flamboyant. There's the choir and everything, but it's also just, the truth is that when you're a kid, it's also just boring.
Oh my God, I bet.
I used to, the other way that I would go is I would read Animorph books. Like my mom let me read because it would get me to go. So, you know, the experience wasn't that bad, but I would try. I just never really bought into it.
You're never hooked. You were just like there.
Yeah, I was just like, because you know, I was listening to what I was supposed to and trying to like feel God in my heart or whatever. And I'd just be like, I would talk to him. People say like, if you talk to God, he will answer you. And be like, he's not saying shit. Like it's just, I'm talking to the ceiling. I'm not getting anything back. Like because it's pretty vague when you're a kid. Like am I supposed to hear something? And this
you're expecting like a grand vision, like Jesus to show up in shining light and be like, hi, Hilary.
Yeah. And this is, I think maybe it's because I'm like neurodivergent. I'm like definitely wildly ADHD. There is uncertainty as to whether I might also be autistic. And I just, if they tell me it's supposed to be a certain way and it's not that way, then I'm not buying it, even though I tried. And so for about 6 months after I was confirmed, so I got the confirmation, you get to choose a name. Ironically, I chose the name Faith.
You get to choose a name?
Yeah,
it's supposed to be like a Catholic name.
It's you pick a saint, and they're like your patron saint. I chose Faith, and it's ironic because I immediately lost it. But the reason I chose it was because of Buffy, the Vampire Slayer. So
that's how you know you're a dedicated Catholic. When you're basing your Catholic name off of Buffy, you know you're in it.
Yeah.
So I think one of the interesting things you said is that the priest was nice, but more so that the priest was focused on, say, Jesus's words and works. Do you think part of the reason why maybe you were able to escape the indoctrination wasn't just the fact that you were allowed to ask questions and kind of absorb teachings on your own? But I wonder, again, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I wonder if he wasn't all fire and brimstone. I wonder if the focus of him trying to help people as compared to always preaching about damnation and how you're doomed had a big part to do with why you weren't convinced or why you weren't
that's quite possible. I mean, I can't speak for other Catholics, but like hell is not something that came up like almost ever. It just was, so that's really interesting. So is that like a big part of?
I feel like it would be. In the deconstruction community, I hear a lot of stories, and I've done, you know, like a series on hail. I've done a series on hell.
Southern.
And the comments that I always get are like, you know, you just undid 20 plus years of trauma for me with this one video.
Oh,
But
that's
the
amazing.
stories that I've had and the stories of like some of my peers around me is like the memories of being like 6, 7 years old and staying up at night and like crying out of
Mm,
fear that
wow.
you're either going to die in your sleep and go to hell, or there's no way maybe you committed the unforgivable sin of blasphemy and the reasons why you're going to church is now pointless because you've already doubted God and now you're going to forever be banished. Like there's a lot of hell anxiety even after people deconstruct. I talk to a lot of people who are atheists even who still have hell anxiety and they don't believe
Mhm.
in hell.
Right.
So yeah, I think there's a lot of focus, especially on the evangelical side, just on punishment and pain. So it's interesting to see you escaped that. And I feel like if a lot of
Yeah.
people had that removed, would they still be tied to the religion if they weren't afraid of leaving it?
Well, that's the question, and I think we know the answer. Guess who else knows the answer to that is evangelicals. They
Oh,
know.
I mean, they use hell as a tool, like it's a marketing
Yeah.
tool for sure.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Yeah, it's child abuse. It's rampant child abuse to make a child fear for their safety, um, in order to keep them in line is like unambiguously child abuse, and it's
Yeah.
so rampant. And on top of the actual physical child abuse that happens frequently in those households, and yeah, that's really interesting. I think certainly credit to my dad. I think seeing my dad be, I think he was very hands off, and he was being respectful of my mom's desire to and for my mom it was all about community and
Right.
it's just culture and heritage and whatnot.
Right.
Um, so he was pretty hands off, but also I could just see the skepticism in him, and
Mm.
just being able to have somebody in your life expressing skepticism of these things is goes a long way.
Gives
But
you
yeah, no,
permission to
he wasn't
question
a lot
things
of
for sure.
yeah, certainly when I was there, my feelings were like the affects that were given to me by the circumstance were an appreciation of music,
Mm.
boredom, just
Boredom.
intense boredom, um, sometimes interest,
Okay.
but fear, no, I
Not
don't think
fear.
fear came up. So
I
that's
hear you.
really interesting because yeah, certainly and I'm a parent now too. I have 2 children, and the difference between authoritarian parenting and non-authoritarian parenting, where you don't use fear, threats, coercion to keep your
Right.
kids in line. I mean, it's kind of insane to me that people do that because like I wonder whether it's even effective, but I know that it's so rampant in the culture.
Yeah.
Um,
I don't think it's
but,
effective, but
but
it just causes kids to rebel later and they rebel harder.
exactly. And like
Yeah.
when I am trying to do things with my kids, the gentle parenting techniques of like, if I have to say no or put down a boundary, you put down the boundary, and then the steps 2 and 3 are you tell them why,
Hmm.
and you give them an alternative. And if you
Hmm.
don't do steps 2 and 3 and all you do is say no, then they're just going to be like upset with you and confused and resentful as to why you're not treating them like a human being worthy of communicating with.
Exactly. And I think you can relate that back to most religious experiences, I would say, where there's, again, you're going to do it this way. This is the doctrine you believe. Sometimes you get a why, sometimes you don't. But as soon as, like you said, there's a question or a boundary in place, it's because God said so. Just like a parent would be like, because I said so. No explanation. It's just God's ways are bigger than ours. I'm not going to tell you why, but this is what you
Yeah.
can't do.
And again, because if they start asking why and start thinking about why, the whole thing falls apart. So
Hmm,
yeah, it's very patriarchal, and it's very just yeah, it's cult like behavior where you just can't question it, can't go into those things because and I know that like it can be like the process of deconstructing and losing faith is very, very painful for a lot of people. Like I do a lot of work on like psychedelics and healing, and I do psychedelic consultations for people who are like starting to use psychedelics for healing. And I've been actually surprised at how many people that I've worked with are using psychedelics to deal with religious trauma,
wow.
to try to like figure out how to maintain their spirituality and their connection to either their belief in a god or a higher power. In the face of like losing their connection to the specific beliefs that they grew up in, because those were
Sure.
traumatic.
Yeah,
Uh,
and it's so formative for a lot of people, especially because it's dealing with indoctrination of children, for example. So like that's like your bone structure. It's something that's built into you, and it can be very I don't want to. Well, I mean, yeah, it can be confusing to try to break away from that, because you're like, wait, is this me or is this what I was told? Is this me or what I was told? And it causes a lot of trauma. I can see how psychedelics might help with that, being able to form new neural pathways to break out of that structure you've been forced to build.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you after teenagers, you're getting donuts. After your teenage years getting donuts, did you just kind of casually fall out of the church, or was there a decision where you're like, I don't want to be Catholic, and then you're like, this is the day I leave?
Okay, so yeah, so I wore like a cross around my neck for like I think 6 months into like high school. I think I thought it was like a special identity I had, you know, like it's like made me special or something. And then I just started hanging out with a different group of people in high school, and they were all just like, so what's that about? And I was like, I don't know. But here's where it gets embarrassing. And it's embarrassing in hindsight, even though I am grateful for the lessons that I got. It's embarrassing for a very specific reason.
Okay.
So Richard Dawkins was big around then.
Yeah.
And he's such a fucking douchebag, like transphobic,
sure.
like Islamophobic psycho now. But the God Delusion came out. Yeah, this was around that time of like that new atheist movement where it was like
the Four Horsemen. And,
Oh yeah. I just started getting into that stuff and started thinking critically about things. I think that because the spirituality, like the beliefs never really did anything for me, and the whole thing was like boring, but I was able to access community outside of it. Like I could just see my friends at school and like still have my family, and like it wasn't like for some people where like if they leave the church they're cut off from their entire community. I didn't have that experience, and I really just started thinking critically about it, and then just kind of being like, this seems dumb. And then of course, like the douchebag 17-year-olds that everyone gets to be, I just leaned really hard into being an atheist as my identity, and went into that sort of like religious people are so stupid, and like look at all these like sheep following whatever. And in hindsight, like I'm not proud of that. I don't think I like was super vocal about it, but like I certainly felt like I was superior and I'm smarter than all of these people. And like, you know, I watched Religulous with Bill Maher. Yeah, and like Jesus Camp. That was, I mean,
Jesus Camp is traumatizing all over again.
Yeah, it's really scary. And prescient, because it came out like a long time ago, and now all of those kids are the ones like making like doing.
Have you Googled them? You should Google them. There's like articles that check in every couple of years, like where are they now? The Jesus Camp kids. Yeah. Some of them became very, very alt-right and opened like their own church, and then like probably half of them are atheists now and like do charity work to like
interesting
on around like children's mental health, etc.
Oh, that's really beautiful.
It went like one of two ways with
like
them.
Crying and
she's still very much in, but her brother is not. Her brother Levi. Anyways, anyone who's interested in that and has seen the movie, go check it out.
Oh yeah, because Levi was the one who like wanted to be a preacher.
Yeah, the little like rat tail, and I've only seen the movie twice, and it's like buried in here.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's very affecting. Yeah, like content warning for like religious trauma if anyone watches that, but it's very good. And anyway, so I was just getting into that kind of thing and feeling very smug and superior about myself. And you know, it was, you know, in hindsight, it was good. It taught me a lot of critical thinking skills that I use to this day, like skepticism and things like that. I'm very, very sad that so many of the thought leaders from that movement, like Ayaan Hirsi Ali and you know, I read the book Infidel, and I remember like the first 40 pages of that book, like just being the most radical thing that I'd ever read. It makes me really sad that like my critical thinking skills that I developed through that experience I suppose mixed with my anthropology degree, where I learned like, oh, other people live and it's fine. Like this is not the only way to do things.
Right.
And just about ethnocentrism and stuff. It gave me a deep compassion for other people, and also just the critical thinking skills that I used to like learn about Marxism. And so many of these people just went alt-right and just became like racist, Islamophobic, you know. I mean, arguably they were Islamophobic from the start. I shouldn't say they became that.
I was going to say, yeah, I think well, for some of them or a lot of them, they hid behind the whole anti-theist thing where they're like, no, I hate everyone religious. But I do definitely, watching back some of the older debates, like they hated all religions, but they had a special punchiness towards Islam, you know?
Yes. Yeah. I wonder why. Yeah. And I remember like being especially sad for Sam Harris, because there was a talk that Sam Harris gave at like an atheist conference that it was really, it was really profound for me, because he opened up the talk by being like, I'm going to talk about something that's going to make you guys mad. I want to challenge us as an atheist community to talk about sort of spiritual and mystical experiences. He was talking about experiences with MDMA and like other psychedelics and like meditation and things that are not necessarily rooted in the supernatural, but that we don't really have great explanations for. I mean, we know how MDMA works, but just being like, let's make room for this. And he was like, people were like, no, bah, like. And so the idea that you can challenge your own community and try to think critically is unfortunately something that he doesn't seem to want to do anymore. But
I think that's interesting too. So where were we at? Okay, wait. So you are like not vocally, you're out, and then internally you're thinking you're superior. So you're at that deconstruction stage, basically, where you're like, I have life figured out. Maybe it's not in deconstruction. Maybe that's just teenagers. You're like, I know the answers of the world. What led you to start, I guess, backing away from that kind of mindset of like there being black and white and opening up to like, oh, the different people have different experiences? Was it just anthropology, or was it before that and that's why you started anthropology? Where do you start to reframe?
I do think that anthropology was a big part of it. I think that traveling was also a big part of it. Certainly the nail in the coffin for Catholicism for me was, and this actually brings full circle to something that we spoke about earlier. So I was a bit of I had some stuff when I was a teenager. I was a bit of a wayward teen. I managed to get into university after taking 5 years to finish high school, and because of other trauma stuff. And I was kind of in a phase where I was just like, I'll just do anything. I'll just say yes to stuff. It's fine. And just exploring life and just meeting people. In my second year of university, I hitchhiked from Vancouver, north of Seattle, to Toronto. So like across Canada. Yeah, I don't know.
Okay, brave but dumb.
I was with my cousin who was a guy, so he,
better.
It was two of us. It's Canada. It's not that dangerous.
I guess.
If you're an Indigenous woman on the highway of tears, it's very fucking dangerous. But we were on the or if you're like a woman alone, but we were, two white kids on the main highways. It was, I don't know, maybe it was dumb, but we were mostly fine. We were fine. We got one really weird, sketchy ride around Alberta. And if there's any Canadians here, they'll be like, oh, yeah, of course it was in Alberta. The Texas of Canada.
Texas of Canada.
The Western Alberta was like super, super nice. But like kind of like Eastern Alberta was like, we got a really weird ride. We had to leave that ride. Anyways.
So you're traveling, you're meeting people.
Yeah. So very specifically, in Northern Ontario, we get picked up by these two sisters, and they were Indigenous sisters, native to the area in Northern Ontario. And so this is like, there's just forests and very tiny towns up there. They mentioned something about their residential school. Because, fun fact, the residential schools didn't fully close until the 90s in Canada. And so these women were probably in their 50s, and they were telling us, and they had mentioned something about a residential school, and we were like, what's that?
Oh.
And they just turned around and looked at us in the backseat and they were like, excuse me? And we were like, what's a residential school? And this alone is indicative of like the level of education that I was getting in the 90s and early 2000s in Canada and school. We just didn't learn about it. Maybe there was a day that they covered it and I skipped that day or something, but you shouldn't be able to skip one day and miss.
I didn't hear about it until I was 30 and on TikTok.
No, but I mean, it's made, you know, in my kids' school, they talk about it all the time. Like it's an annual thing. Like it's a thing now. But so these two women, these sisters, gave me and my cousin one of the most profound and beautiful gifts anybody has ever given me, which is they took us to the residential school that they went to. And they were like, we're going to educate these little white pieces of shit. And we like, you know, what's a residential school? Like, whatever.
Yeah.
And no, they were super nice. And they showed us about it. And I was just like, the Catholic Church did this?
Yes. Finally seeing like a visual aspect of like maybe the Catholic Church isn't the good guy all the time in history.
Yeah.
They always said that they were. Wait, what?
Yeah, it turns out my priest was an anomaly. And yeah, I know that in my family there was generational trauma from you know, different forms of abuse that were related to Catholic schools. And it's really deeply entrenched. And I think that generational trauma is a thing that that white people amongst ourselves need to talk about and reckon with more often, because it's a thing, and it's often deeply tied to the Catholic Church, to other churches, to immigration, to, you know, like my family immigrated because of the Irish potato famine and because of like poverty in Sicily and stuff like that. And so generational trauma is real, but the thing that white people have that you know, like the people who aren't white have a sort of awareness of the roots of their generational trauma in colonialism, and they can't just, well, depending on who you are, leaning into whiteness instead as a way to, like, you know, heal and move on from that is not available to them. But white people are able to just sort of pretend that none of that happened and just lean into the whiteness that we are offered on a platter as a way of like, okay, you know, this is how you escape this. This is, you just
lean into it and then abuse other groups and you'll be okay.
yeah. And so getting away from that involves acknowledging the ways that generational trauma has existed within our communities. And obviously it's ourselves and then spread out just to everybody else via
unfortunately.
Us. But yeah, so that was the nail in the coffin for that. And but certainly, you know, I was in the I kind of had another deconstruction from my atheist phase.
That's what I was getting at, is where did you went to from Catholic-ish to atheist, but like you were talking about the whole superiority thing, and I was like, both of those views are very black and white. So where did you start to open up to like, wait, there's a myriad of cultures, there's a whole bunch of different things, I don't know everything? Was it because of that journey that you're talking about when you're hitchhiking across, or where was that separation? Obviously nothing happens all at once, but you know what I mean?
that was sort of like in the religious stuff. But it was certainly, that was like an awakening in terms of like learning about the political context for these things, and like the wider, like it's not just the church, because this was also the government, like this is the Canadian government. So to just like to the people within the atheist sort of movement, the new atheism and stuff. I don't know if there's all these people are still doing this thing, but you know, the ones who were like, religion is the source of all of the problems in the world, like that kind of attitude. It was like, wait, but no, but this was also the government. But deconstructing my militant atheism started to happen because of my anthropology degree, and because I joined I went to the University of Victoria for my undergrad, and I joined the Skeptic Society or like whatever. And I remember being in a meeting, and one of them kind of like really mocking Indigenous medicine. And I was just like, what are you talking, like stuff like the ingredients that we take in our,
I was to say all medicine is still currently based on Indigenous herbal recipes.
Like it's like, where do you think we get the compounds that are in
the compound
our medicines? Like it's just extracted and then put into a pill for profit, but like these compounds are still, And I remember, and it just didn't jive with like what I had been learning about, like, oh no, the way that other people live, they live differently, and that's okay. And also just stuff about like, why are we focusing so much on like female genital mutilation in Africa and not like just, you know, the stuff in the literal child skulls in our own backyard?
Yeah.
Like what, like there's just, it just didn't make sense to me. And I think that was like, without having the words for it back then, that was my first encounter with the sort of like white supremacist undertones of some of these like new atheist movements, where it was just like, is this about critical thinking, or is this about white Westerners are the
Being
best and
superior,
the smartest,
right?
But we are just even smarter than the religious white Westerners? Like, what are we doing here?
It's using the tools that you're talking about again that were handed down to white generation, and being like, oh, you know, once that light clicks into thinking you know better, then of course taking that as a position of power and a position of superiority, because that's the tool set, you know, unless you've decolonized and done the work to really approach the biases and the way that you operate. Of course, you're going to use that as like a domination tool, because that's what your whiteness does.
Yeah. And I do, you know, I obviously think in hindsight, like I was still pretty interested in all this stuff when I was in undergrad, even though my academic interests went more in the drug policy side, because like drugs, psychedelics were so foundational to my healing and becoming the person that I am today, and like gaining empathy and all that. But my honors thesis, I was in like the honors anthropology program, because I was just a keener who like replaced whatever I was getting my self-esteem from before nowhere with like being a overachiever in school. And
relatable.
Yeah, and I did my honors thesis on, we had to do a mock research project, like design a research project. And it was going to be on interviewing atheist kids from fundamentalist Christian families, because I was really interested in, and obviously you could speak to this as well, the sort of like parallels between kids who have to like come out as queer versus kids who come out as atheists. And I had seen some videos where like kids, like, you know, teenagers would like record, like put a camera when they would like come out as I'm sorry, I just don't believe in God, to their family, and they'd get like screamed at, like fully.
It's very, very interesting parallels for sure. And the fact that I've always just been fascinated by, I don't want to say people who don't realize the parallel, but more so people who don't think about it intrinsically, because like they're both called coming out. And I think the fact that you come out right there is like, that right there should tell you the ties. Like it's very, I don't want to say scary, but it could be very scary depending on the family.
Yeah. And I think it's important to talk about the parallels, because as an antidote to the, you know, oppression Olympics stuff that we get on the left sometimes, a really important approach to this kind of thing is like, where are the sources of solidarity, the points of overlap, and just being like, oh, you also had this experience with like authoritarian parents, or you also like had to deal with this. You were also kicked out of your house for this. And another one is drugs. I have spoken with many of my comrades and colleagues, some of whom are queer, but were more afraid to come out as a drug user to their parents than they were to come out as gay. Or bi, because it depends on what family you're from,
and what stigma and what class even.
Exactly.
For sure.
Yeah,
I say class, but you know what I mean. Socioeconomic background.
and just like, you know, it's criminalized, it's stigmatized.
Right.
Obviously, they're trying to recriminalize queerness too in a lot of places, but
yeah, we'd even get into all that.
Yeah,
it's okay. We can not talk about that for a little bit. It'll be fine.
Yeah.
I feel like that's all I talk about all day, every day right now, because I mean, it's very
worth talking about.
It's very necessary. Yeah.
But
it's good to take a break and get back to basics for a second.
Yeah. But anyway, so this you know, the overlap and the things that we have in common.
My Siri decided I wanted to turn on stuff. Okay. Okay, so actually we're about 10 minutes away from the hour, so I want to
Okay.
open up to chat. If you have any questions for either Hilary, myself, it could be on some of the topics we talked about, or anything you've ever seen in my or her videos. But go ahead and you can type them in the chat. I do have two I wanted to highlight because I see two very different interactions in the chat around growing up in Canada, and I think this is interesting. So first we have Heidi, who said, 57 and angry that the truth about residential schools and First Nations and the Indian Act were kept away just from the schooling or what happened here. And then I don't know if I'm saying this right. You win. Responded to that and said, as a teacher, you were taught about residential schools, and it's always been in the textbooks for Canada. How do we not know? So I find that very interesting, and I wonder if that's like, again, comes down to the schooling system. Do you have any? Because you said you also weren't taught. You're in the Heidi camp where that was not in your classes.
Yeah, and now, like, again, I skipped school a lot when I was in high school, so like it's quite possible that I missed it. But again, I still don't I graduated. I went to most of my classes. Like I shouldn't have been able to even miss 10 to 20% of my classes and just fully not learn about residential schools.
Sure. Because this was like a one packet thing or like a one day little topic, and they moved on.
Yeah, and so maybe it was up to the teacher. I think that the way that you teach about residential schools also probably makes a big impact, because even if we learn about like, oh, there were these residential schools and like whatever, they were a thing.
Yeah.
It's easy to kind of teach that if a teacher chose, or if the curriculum isn't explicit enough. I know the curriculum has changed. It would be theoretically easy to teach that in a way that like you're not really teaching it. Like
that reminds me of growing up in California in the 90s. If anyone else was a California 90s babe, it was very important to the school system to teach missions, like actual physical mission, like San Mateo, or like I can't even think of a mission right now, but because we have them since California was part of Mexico, we have historical mission buildings still up, and they're like, sites for history. But the way it was taught to us was, like you get to pick your favorite mission, like go get an encyclopedia, look up all the different missions in California, and then make a 3D model diorama of the mission, and then do a little presentation to the class about what the name of the mission is, when it was built, maybe who the priest was that oversaw it, like whatever little information about it was. So here they are focused on, I don't want to say celebrating, but learning about missions without ever getting into the fact that Catholics were coming to Mexico, creating missions, and force converting the native Mexican people. Like that was never talked about. We were more like, look how pretty. We made a diorama. I love how this one is brown and made of adobe. And then we had a little lesson about what adobe bricks are. But we didn't talk about how the Mexican natives were forced all day to make bricks for these missions that the white people are for. You know what I mean? So it's definitely how you come at it. Because we learned about it, but we didn't learn about it.
Yeah, exactly. And there's could be a kind of like both sidesing of it. Like I think it actually came out that there was like an assignment that was given in a class, and I want to say Alberta, but maybe I'm just scapegoating Alberta. It might have been Saskatchewan or something like that, where it was like, these are residential schools. Name some of the like pros and cons of residential. Like it was something like really bad like that, and it was, so it just depends on how it's taught. But I think also there's probably a lot of bullshit like, well, we want to protect kids from like the horrors of the reality of it, which is
that's what they're trying to do now,
genocide,
or at least
denial.
Eugen. Okay. No, that's exactly what they're trying to do right now with, African American history and Black history, being like, we're trying to save the children from the traumatizing horrors, and they're just wanting to be graphic and play Roots all day. I don't know what their ideas are, but
if they care so much about preventing trauma in children, maybe they should stop sending Black children to fucking prison by the hundreds of thousands. Maybe that would be a helpful way to prevent some trauma.
But yeah, no, I mean, that's the thing. They hide behind the, I don't know, the guilt by association, I guess. Like, and there's ways, obviously, you've been in classes and you know how to teach other people. there's ways to teach things that do not make light of the situation and allow it to be the heavy topic that it is without it being traumatizing. Like you can still come at it at an age appropriate academic level where they understand this was disgusting, but not be like, here, look at this picture of a dead body. Like there's ways to do it.
This is a really interesting thing because I think that there's threads to pull on here related to Puritanism, religious indoctrination, and shame, because for so many people, and it ties into why under capitalism and colonialism, there's just like rampant narcissism, which is a complicated thing and a bit of a trending kind of like thing, but I know a lot about it, and a big part of it is just like not being able to like admit wrongdoing because because of the shame that it creates, because the shame it's not a good emotion. We shame people too much on the left. Actually, that's another soapbox that I could go on, but shame is not an emotion that gets people to like understand and you know, and do better. And so if these like white Christians in Florida or whatever think that like by critiquing the US or critiquing any of these things, we're trying to shame them and like, or like blame like white children for, you know, saying like, this is your fault, which nobody's doing, but you know, if it's a shame, if they're from a shame-based culture where punishment, you know, and shame were just an intrinsic part of like how you deal with problems, then of course they're going to be terrified of like having to feel that like that shame. But if we say like, no, we're not saying that you personally were like responsible for colonization. We're saying that these things happened. Right. The results of them are still today, and we can do better. And nobody has to like feel bad about it. It's not about making people feel bad. It's about like creating structures that work for all of us, which we cannot do if we can't acknowledge what happened.
Yeah. I don't even care if people feel bad.
Well, I know, this
personally,
this is my Sam Harris moment where I'm like, I go to the left and I'm like, I actually don't think we should be making people feel bad.
No, like if you see a Nazi, punch them. Come on, I don't care.
Well, it's not people, so they don't count. No, just kidding. But the thing is that, like, you know, there's enemies that are genuinely like we have to fight, that are like Nazis, right? With that, but
somebody who actually holds ideologies that are harmful, as compared to just being Trevor in 3rd grade and he's white. Yeah.
But like, the main thing that I do when I study, my current PhD dissertation project is actually on activism and social change, and like what is effective, because even if certain people deserve to feel shame, does that help?
It doesn't convert anybody. It just isolates them and radicalizes, usually.
Right, exactly. So it's like, even we can want to give in to our instincts to just rage and shame and like make these people feel pain because they deserve it. But does that make our children's lives better on this planet? You know, like, does that help the movement that we actually want? Or are we just giving into like an instinctive sort of vengeance, like this like base
the tribalism brain coming out?
Yeah. And it's like, we have to fight that. And we have to be like, okay, if I want to change somebody's mind, they have to feel safe with me, because people can't change if they feel unsafe. And if they don't feel safe to be vulnerable, and we don't create a space where we're like, yeah, these things happen and it's okay, you can be vulnerable, we're not going to like make you feel like a piece of shit, then they can come around to it. But if we're creating spaces where we're like, you know, Puritan, and like, you are either like one of us or you're a sinner, we're not going to get anywhere.
Nice tie around back to the religion. I like it. Okay. So I don't really see any other questions, but we're at the hour mark. I mean, we don't have to stop talking. I just generally try to like be respectful of your time. I know you have kids and it's a weekend and it's chaotic. But I love everything you do, and I want you to be able to like take a moment and promote yourself. Tell anybody if you have any upcoming projects that you want them to know about. Obviously, like your socials, so they can follow you and get to learn more if they're interested in like you're saying, trauma healing through psychotherapy. Or...
So so the main place I want people to follow me is on YouTube, because I've got 75,000 followers on TikTok, which I did like accidentally during my maternity leave, because I couldn't just stop working and shut up and like relax for a second. I had to like obsessively scream about capitalism into my phone while I was breastfeeding my baby. But TikTok doesn't pay anybody in Canada. There's no creator fund in Canada. And so it's not a sustainable like area of like my public education work. So I'm trying to build up my YouTube audience. I've like built up this huge audience on Twitter and then this huge audience on TikTok, and I'm like, fuck, I gotta do it again.
I have your link tree in the description so people know, but also is your name just the same here on YouTube? Is it at HilaryAgro?
Yeah, I think I'm like Ketamom on YouTube. For some reason, HilaryAgro was taken, and I think it's taken by an old defunct account of mine. So it's okay. You can search for me.
Yourself out.
Yeah, you can search for me. It's like at Ketamom on YouTube, or you can just search for my name. And I'll give you the links and stuff. But yeah, so the other thing that I do, which I'll give you a link to put in the description when this is out, is if anybody is curious about like psychedelics are a big thing now, oh god, I could talk for another million hours about that, because
that's like a whole episode on its own.
Yeah, well, I mean, I talk about it in my work a lot. It's like psychedelics are wonderful and great, but like there's a lot of shady shit that's happening. And interesting thing that we could actually talk about some other time. They're already looking at like churches getting access to. So imagine an evangelical mega church and the shit that comes out of there. Now give everybody mushrooms.
Actually, that might be better as long as they're not giving them like LSD. I feel like maybe it depends on who's on and who's off. I guess don't give the pastor. No, I mean, do give the pastor the psychedelics and then see what happens. And
here's the thing though, there's a misconception that psychedelics are on their own enough to make people like empathetic or
right.
And the truth is that cults have been using psychedelics to like manipulate people for
absolutely
and to enable like religious fundamentalists, like large scale cults to do that is like really dangerous and scary.
Well, I think that's probably, I don't know how it's working in Canada, but in California, obviously, or not California, but in the United States, there's different levels of a fight to decriminalize drugs. So California is still pretty hoity-toity about things, which is interesting. Like we're not Oregon. Like Oregon passed, mushrooms.
You will be in about 2 years, though.
I think so as well. I would like to see decriminalization across the board federally, but that's a radical belief, I'm sure.
For psychedelics specifically, there's billions in venture capital being poured into it right now, which means that
I bought shares in a company that is trying to commercialize mushrooms. I have stocks in those companies. They can't legally make any money and can't make any sales, but they're currently like set up with all the product and all the stuff. They just have to press go. And literally the stock price keeps going up because everyone's talking about it, but they've never made a sell.
Yeah.
But what I was going to say is what they're trying to do here, like in addition to the decriminalized portion, like obviously they just kind of got more funding for like medical research for, say, ketamine and therapy, which is why you see ads all over like Instagram, or maybe it's just me because I have depression. Maybe it's just my algorithm. But
that's one of those insane things that like drug companies are allowed to advertise in the US. We don't have drug ads.
No, we have a lot of them, and they're very targeted. Like, why does Instagram know I'm depressed and I'm on antidepressants? I don't know, but it does. I always get like, join this new medical study for this new drug and live with us for a week and we'll give you $1,000. Like, I get those advertisements, which is
it's all connected to your credit card. So if you've ever paid for your meds with your credit card,
that's a good point.
What
was I saying? Oh, so what they're trying to do is, in addition to like the medical side of it, where they're trying to get and allow funding for actual testing, and then obviously you have the psychotherapy. I would say like there's a small niche thing, like the ones that are clinical are very much just ramping up the price of ketamine and just like not really caring, because they're like at-home treatment kits where they come with a pre-recorded tape of a therapist to guide you through. And I'm like, $3,000 for that? What? The other side of it is they're trying to get ritualized or like legalized in ritual sense. So the way that California first started with marijuana becoming legalized, outside of the medical side where we had our medical cards, it was legal to have any tribal or Native American church prescribe or hand out or use marijuana within their sessions. So even though it was not federally recognized, they said that even if they're not on a reservation, it's still a tribal space because it's a religious practice and you can allow marijuana to be in the religion. So there's a lot of people who would go to Native American churches just to buy their marijuana because they didn't want to have a medical license and they didn't want to be registered. But I see the same exact thing happening now with psychedelics, where they're again putting that back onto the tribal churches. I don't want them in any evangelical churches, but I could see it becoming part of like a tribal church and being like, go here, talk to this person. They'll tell you how to take it. They'll administer what strain you need or what different, species. I think that would be fine. I think that's a cool way to approach it.
Yeah, I don't like being a party pooper about this stuff, but somebody has to be. Yeah, I love psychedelics deeply, but they are complicated tools, and they need to be approached with respect and care. And the fact that they're getting monetized means that is not going to happen.
Yeah.
But anyway, the thing I was going to plug is that doing my part because I did this for years, sort of like just within community and stuff, and I recently made it open, and people have been responding really well. Is that the main thing that you need for a psychedelic experience is not, there's a lot of these places that are making money off of it by making people like feel like they need to be dependent on a therapist or a guide, or like it's this like kind of guru shit where it's like, no, you need me to guide you, and like anybody can use psychedelics if you just have the right information and you go about things very carefully. It's just that getting the right information is tricky. And so I do journey curation now. I do journey guiding as well for people in the Greater Toronto area, but I do journey curation, which is where I consult with people who have access to psychedelics but are kind of like just nervous and don't know how they should use it or what they should think about dosing, all that kind of thing. So I consult with them and just like sort of personalize a plan for them to be able to, because like, as
individual needs and individual
and
experiences,
also,
you don't know what you're overcoming until you can really work through what your end goal is. I think a lot of people go in just diving without an end goal.
Yeah, which can be great, but it's more recreational. My thing as an educator and an organizer is I want to empower people. I want to enable people to like feel confident to do things for themselves, because healing isn't really healing unless you feel like it's coming from yourself. So I just want to like educate people and use like all of my knowledge and years in harm reduction and stuff. And so that's something that's fun that I've been doing that has been supporting my research, my PhD research, because my grant is done. So we'll give that.
That's very exciting. Wait, your PhD is going to be in anthropology as well? Or
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, awesome. I'm currently doing my field work. I'm like interviewing people. I'm like doing the field work right now.
Very cool.
It's neat. It's coming.
Can't wait to call you doctor.
Yeah, I know. I can't wait to like be like Dr. HilaryAgro PhD and just trolling, various local politicians and yeah. Jordan Peterson already blocked me, so
that is a blessing. You are very lucky. Don't ever interact with him again. That sounds like a great day. No, okay. So we're gonna wrap this up. Thank you so much again. All of her contacts are in the description. The link tree is there right now, and I'll add some more once I get them from you. You are allowed back anytime. I think we should really actually dive into like what you were saying about really approaching different ways of spiritual experiences and psychedelics. I like to see what you've learned in that regard, just because it's fitting for the channel topic. But also, I'll just have you back on it anytime. And then
I love your work. So excited to be here. Just you're a legend. You're an icon.
Okay, I won't say that. But thank you to everyone who's here today. I will probably have an episode out next week, but I will be gone, so I'll be virtually with you in the chat. And then what else was I gonna say? Like the stream before you leave, subscribe, all that stuff. And memberships are now live. I was dumb. I put in the emojis and like the special badges that you get when you are a YouTube member and set up all the perks, and they got approved. And apparently you still have to push live, like you still have to push like start, and I didn't push start. That's why you didn't see them today, but it's on my profile if you want to check that out. If you have questions or corrections, you can email me at JeGaysus@gmail.com. It's also in my link tree, and I will see you next time. Also, I'm going to have a video out tomorrow. That's another long form video that is unique and original to YouTube and is like 20 minutes long. It's not a compilation, and I'm getting.
I love how like coming from TikTok, 20 minutes is long form. Like
No, I have friends who post 3-minute long form videos on here, and
Oh my God.
I've done 2 of those, but I'm like, that's TikTok has 3 minutes.
Oh no, I'm out here watching like 2-hour FD signifier
That's-
videos on
me
YouTube.
too.
I'm like, yeah.
I will watch a 5-hour debate. Like that's my YouTube feed. Anyway, okay. Much love, everybody. Spread kindness, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.
Thanks.
Oh.